definitely want to thank Brian for getting the word out. We're all here for one reason, pretty much one reason only. Nobody likes the way the direction of the government's going, so everybody's in this kind of a mood, kind of a somber mood. My name is Vance McGahee, and I live in Kimmer, which is not far from here. Been in Wyoming for about 20 years. I was born and raised in Kansas. Just kind of packed up everything I had and moved and wound up in Green River with 20 bucks in my pocket and a truckload of clothes. Been here ever since. Love it here.
Well, you made it.
Yeah, the rest of us. About a year and a half ago, I was doing some internet searches in between shifts, and I come across Convention of States. And so I signed a petition and got a call from a lady on the other side of the state who volunteers for and stuff. Congratulate me for coming aboard with Convention of States. And asking if I wanted to volunteer. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested in it. And I'm a veteran. I was in the Marine Corps in the 90s. And so she introduced me into the Veterans Coalition director for the state of Wyoming. Now there's a few others that are part of this. And our membership has grown in the last couple of months, especially since November. And our volunteers have really increased as well. And the one thing we lack on through this area is we don't have volunteers here. We did actually pick up two. I take that back. We did pick up two last week at the Untitled Chapter. And it's word of mouth. There's certain places you just can't hear this from. How many people have never heard of Convention of States before Brian mentioned it or saw it on Facebook? It's quite a few. I mean, that's well about half, or maybe a little over half that's never heard of it. And it's an Article 5 convention. There's two ways to amend the Constitution. One is through Congress, and the other is through state. Congress has done it many times. It's never happened through the states before. And what we're trying to do is get it to where we can pass it through the states without Congress's involvement. The only thing that they can do is name the time and place. That's all the involvement they have. And we're looking for 3 proposals. Here are the 3 proposals right up here. To impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. And we can all agree that the amount of money going overseas, when we kind of need it over here to pay our deficit off or anything, everybody can agree that we need to stop sending money where it shouldn't be going right now. Limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. I'm tired of these laws telling us how we should and should not live. I always use the expression of raw milk. Raw milk, it's up to the states to decide how they want to do raw milk. And but as soon as you take it across that state line, then it becomes federal. It's against the law, federal law, for raw milk. And that's where the intra-state commerce clause come into effect. They can regulate what goes in between states, And then third is place term limits, and I'm sure everybody's going to agree on this. Place term limits on Congress and federal officials and bureaucrats. And a lot is, I was watching this video, I was with a friend of mine, we were watching this video yesterday, and it was about an hour and a half long, it was on YouTube. And it started out with raw milk, and it went into social media, and what the problems are, and everything in between. And they were talking about how when a congressman gets out of Congress, they become part of the bureaucrats. They become part of the problem. Then it goes back and forth. The bureaucrats get elected to Congress. So it's just a revolving door, constantly. And that's where our issues are. So I'm going to start this video, and this is about 20 minutes long, and there'll be a few people on here talking, and they're going to really explain the Article 5 Convention of States project. And it's a really good video. Once we get done with that, I'm going to talk for a few more minutes, and then there is a short clip of Mark Meckler. He's one of our co-founders for the Convention of States project. And he is pleading a case in Montana. This was at the end of January. So Montana, it looks like, you know, everything goes good. Montana could be the 16th state. I'd prefer Wyoming, but we'll see where we're at. So I'm going to start this video real quick. Somebody get the lights for me right here, please. Hey, let's do it. All right, I'm good. Yeah, we're good.
First of all, I want you to be sure to know that I'm glad you're here, and in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to provide everything you need to know about Article 5 and the Convention of States project, the problem, the solution, how it works, our strategy, and finally, how to get involved. If you're unfamiliar with this idea and this movement, don't worry. I was sitting right where you are not too long ago, and hopefully by the end of our time together, you'll have a good grasp of the basics. The Convention of States project is designed to address the three biggest problems we see in Washington, D.C. the debt and spending crisis, the overreach of the federal government, and the negative effects of career politicians. First, the debt and spending crisis. Here's the most important fact about our spending problem. Party doesn't matter. Democrats and Republicans both spend far beyond our means, and it's jeopardizing our future and our children's and grandchildren's future as well. But we'll feel the effects of this irresponsible spending even before our grandchildren are saddled with the national debt. According to expert analysis, the Medicare fund will be depleted by 2026, and Social Security will be gone by 2034. The second problem is government overreach. There are many ways that Washington abuses its power, but one of the most egregious ways happens every day in federal bureaucracies. Most people don't realize that bureaucrats are not elected, and yet they are responsible for the vast majority of the laws and regulations under which we live. Here's the problem. Article 1 of the Constitution says that all legislative power is vested in the Congress. I think this video does a great job of illustrating how far we've departed from that idea. And the federal bureaucracy isn't the only branch that creates laws out of thin air. The Supreme Court does too.
People like us, people that are frustrated with Washington, D.C., often say, well, they don't follow the Constitution anyway. Not true. They follow the wrong one. They're following the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court rather than the Constitution as written.
This, taking out of my pocket, is a pocket Constitution. 4,000 words in the original document, 4,400 words. If you count the amendments, we're talking about 7,000 words. But here is the Constitution in force today. This is 3,000 pages of Supreme Court rulings showing what every ruling has done to the original words. This isn't going to get any smaller. In fact, every time they publish this document, they leave a bunch of blank pages at the back for additional rulings that they know are coming. Every page in this document means a grant of power to the federal government. Understand that this is the Constitution in operation today, and unless we change it, unless we make its wording crystal clear, we're going to continue to operate under this document forever and ever until the whole house of cards comes falling down.
Neither bureaucrats nor Supreme Court justices are elected, which takes power away from the people and gives it to entities that are almost never held accountable for their actions. And speaking of unaccountable federal officials, our founders never wanted anyone to make a career out of public service. But look how long these men and women from both sides of the aisle have been in Washington. You might say, what's wrong with that? Their constituents elect them. Why shouldn't they continue serving? The problem is that the longer someone stays in D.C., the more they smell like the swamp. The more they become tied to the bureaucracies and special interests, the less they're willing to stick their neck out for the good of their constituents, or more importantly, the good of our country. And as you can see, the problem is getting worse. And why shouldn't it? Our federal officials, whether we're talking about bureaucrats, the Supreme Court, or congresspeople, don't have any incentive to change the status quo. They're perfectly happy to continue acquiring more power, wealth, and influence as long as we, the people, let them. This is one of our core beliefs at the Convention of States Project. The federal government will never fix itself. They'll never stop spending, abusing their power, or seeking re-election. Fortunately, the founders predicted this would happen. That's why they included Convention of States in Article 5 of the Constitution.
The 15th of September, 2 days before they signed the document, the end of 4 long, hot months in Philadelphia, they were ready to go home. But George Mason noticed that Article 5 only had a single method for amending the Constitution. He said, wait a minute, what if Congress becomes an obstacle?
It was given to us by George Mason, who said, look at guys, someday this government's going to abuse its power, and there won't be anything for you ever to ratify if it's counting on Congress to reduce the power of the federal government. So we need to give the states the ability to reduce the power of the federal government.
As that video explains, the founders wrote Article 5 for one specific reason, so that the states could check federal power. They knew that without the Convention of States option, a corrupt, powerful federal government would never fix itself, which brings us to the actual text of Article 5. Here's what it says. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress. At its most basic level, Article 5 allows the state legislatures to call a convention for the purpose of proposing amendments. This convention can only be called if 2/3 of the states, today that would be 34, pass resolutions calling for such a convention. And note the word proposing. An Article 5 Convention of States is a meeting of states in which they discuss potential amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Those amendments, as Article 5 says, must then be sent back to the states and ratified by 38 legislatures. This is a very high bar, but it ensures that only the best, most popular amendments will finally be added to our founding document. Our plan is simple. We want to use Article 5 as the founders intended. We believe the federal government has gone off the rails, and we want to encourage the states to use their power under Article 5 to get our nation back on track. Like the colonists did during the War for Independence, our desire isn't to scrap everything and start something brand new. Instead, we want to get back to our founding principles, and we believe the best, most effective way to do this is to call a convention of states. Fortunately, the founders predicted this would happen. That's why they included the Convention of States option in Article 5 of the Constitution. First, citizens ask their state legislatures to pass a resolution calling for Article 5 Convention of States. Millions of patriots all across the country have done this by signing the Convention of States petition, and thousands more have called, emailed, and met with their state representatives. Next, the Convention of States resolution follows the same process as any other resolution. It must pass committees in both chambers and finally pass the full chamber in the House and the Senate. Once 34 states pass identical resolutions calling for a Convention of States, Congress is obliged under Article 5 to name a time and a place for the convention. The state legislatures decide how to select delegates to the convention, but no matter how many delegates they send, each state gets only one vote. At the convention, delegates propose, debate, and vote on amendments. We'll get into the details of this in a minute. But for now, it's important to know that all amendments proposed must be limited to the language of the Convention of States resolution. Any off-topic amendments will be considered out of order. Amendment proposals are passed when a simple majority of the state delegations vote for them. Next, the amended proposals that pass out of the convention are sent back to the states for ratification. 38 states must vote yes for any amendment proposal to become part of the Constitution. Again, this is a very high bar, and it all but ensures that no bad amendments will end up in our founding document. You can think of it like this. It only takes one legislative chamber in 13 states to keep any amendment from moving forward. I don't know about you, but I can easily think of 13 states that would kill any amendment limiting freedom or drastically restructuring our system of government. Finally, once that entire process is complete, the amendment proposals become part of the Constitution. Our strategy consists of the two main arenas, the state legislatures and the grassroots. On the legislative side, we're seeking to pass the Convention of States resolution in at least 34 states. We've already passed it in 15 states, which means we're already over 1/3 of the way there. Our resolution calls for amendments in 3 distinct categories that limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints on Congress, mandate term limits for federal officials. Remember, like I said before, when the states call for a convention of states under this resolution, they can only propose amendments that fall into one of these 3 categories. The Convention of States project doesn't endorse any particular amendments. Rather, we want the states to debate and propose specific amendment languages under one of these broad topics. Here's where you come in. Along with lobbying state legislatures, we're seeking to build the nation's largest grassroots army. And as you can see, we're well on our way. We have volunteer teams with leadership structures in each state. Over 3.7 million volunteers and supporters. Actually, it's now over 4 million. And local leadership, what we call district captains, in over 1,700 state house districts. Thanks in large part to the grassroots army, the momentum for the Convention of States movement is building all across the nation. The green states represent where we've already passed our resolution, There are 15 so far. So we've also conducted polling in 26 states that have yet to pass our resolution. In those states, over 60% of voters say they would support their state calling for a convention of states. Finally, one of the most exciting aspects of the Article 5 movement is that it enjoys bipartisan support. Over half of Democrats and 75% of Republicans say they would back a convention of states to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. Plus, some of the nation's most prominent thinkers and leaders have taken note of the growing convention of states movement. For example, Tom Coburn. He is a senior advisor with the Convention of States Project, and he has done wonderful things to help advance this movement. There are also 5 presidential candidates that have all endorsed the Convention of States Project. In conclusion, if you'd like to get involved, here are 3 of the best ways. We have additional volunteer and leadership positions available, and if you're interested in any of these opportunities, please don't hesitate to speak with me or to send an email to G Rapini, G-R-A-P-I-N-I at COS Action, and we will help you. Or, of course, go to conventionofstates.com and you can get involved. But there are 3 ways you can be most helpful to growing our movement. First of all, you can simply sign the official Convention of States petition at conventionofstates.com. When you sign the petition and provide your full address, we'll automatically send a copy of the petition to your state legislators. This is a great, easy way to let your representatives know that you support the Convention of States resolution in your state legislature. Next, you can volunteer to be a district captain in your local community. Here's a brief video explaining that position.
All of us at the Convention of States Project truly believe freedom is worth fighting for. That's why we are executing a strategy that uses the Constitution to restore America. We believe the key to our success is creating and mobilizing a grassroots army at the state level, and the most critical member of this grassroots army is the district captain. We need a district captain in each of the 5,000 state house districts nationwide. As a district captain, you're on the front line in the fight for liberty. You'll be connecting Convention of States supporters in your local area, partnering with your state director to organize local town halls, meetings, and petition drives, and mobilizing local activists to have their voices heard at your state legislature. We will give you all the tools you will need and proudly stand shoulder to shoulder with you as we recruit, train, mobilize, and engage the largest grassroots army in the history of the United States. So be a part of the movement that refuses to let liberty die and stands up for our children and their future. Welcome aboard.
Stop it right there. I'm going to play one more short video, and this is going to be Mark Meckler making his remarks at Montana. It's just going to be a few minutes long.
Okay, we'll open it up to proponents in the room. Proponents in the room, step up to the microphone. Don't be shy.
Honorable Chairman, honorable members of the committee, my name is Mark Meckler. I'm the president of Convention of States Action. We are the national group that is responsible for helping to move this initiative forward all across the country. I've had the great honor of traveling the country. I've been in 48 states and the legislatures in most of those states. And I will tell you, being in those legislatures, being here in Montana today is what actually is the only thing giving me hope for our nation today. The state legislatures are filled with real public servants, people who are here for the right reasons, not for money, not for fame, not for power, but because they care about their states. And they've taken an oath to their state constitution and the United States Constitution. Today in America, all of that is at stake. I think people agree with this regardless of what side of the aisle they're on. We're seeing incredible division, perhaps the greatest division we've ever seen in modern America. And everybody, regardless of the side of the aisle or the political ideology, is concerned about what's going on in the country today. I'm here to tell you that the only solution that I'm aware of today in the United States of America that can solve the big problems facing our country is Article 5. Our problem is we're so divided as a nation and we do everything or so many things in Washington, D.C. Roughly 60 to 65% of your state budget is controlled in Washington, D.C. And with a divided nation, what that means is roughly 50% of us are always angry about what's going on in Washington, D.C. The founders had a solution for this. They called it Article 5. The founders told us back in 1787 that if we got to the point where we felt like the federal government was doing too much, was too involved, was too tyrannical, not by party, but by institution in Washington, D.C., that we should call an Article 5 convention and we should take our power back. We should return it to the states. People are concerned, and rightly concerned, that we live in a nation where people don't really like each other, but the true history of our country is we haven't always really liked each other. In 1787, we joined together because we fought a common foe, but you move forward through history, we fought a civil war, we've always disliked and distrusted each other between states, and the only thing that made it work is that we had a federal government that was designed to do a limited amount of enumerated things, the things that we believed that we had to do together in a dangerous world to be successful as a nation. Today, the federal government has far exceeded those bounds. And regardless of party, we are frustrated by Washington, D.C. But we do have the power, you have the power to do something extraordinary. You, as state legislators, are extraordinarily imbued with power. You're not told this when you get your orientation here, but you are the only people in the federal government with the power to call a convention, to propose amendments, and to ratify those amendments, thereby restructuring the United States government and bringing the power back to the people in the states. Why you? Why were state legislators given this power? And I think the answer is obvious when you look at history, because those who served in the convention in 1787 were state legislators. They served in state legislatures, colonial legislatures, they served on town councils and county boards. So why did the founders give them the power? Why them and not somebody in Congress? And the reason is because the founders didn't trust you any more than they trusted people who would be in Congress. They understood human frailty and human flaws and human nature better than almost anybody. What they did is they trusted people more who were close to the people that they governed. Nowhere is this more true than in the Montana legislature. You go home and you live with your constituents. You live the same lives that they do. You're not insulated from them. You're not separated from them. They can come here and see you here. They can see you at home. And they do see you at home. In church, on the ball field, in service organizations. And the founders knew that someday the federal government would grow out of control and it would take state legislators to step up to the plate and rein it in. And that's what we're asking you to do today. In summary, one of the things you're going to hear that there's going to be a runaway convention and we are going to lose our government if we allow there to be a convention. It's very important that you understand two things. One, we've lost our government. If you think you have any control over what goes on in Washington, D.C. today, the control is the other way around. They control us as individuals and they control your state, 60 to 65% of your budget. Number two, and equally important, the idea of a runaway convention is a fallacy. It's actually a fallacy that was invented in the 1970s by the radical left to stop conservatives who were trying to do important things to limit the growth of federal government. And you don't have to believe me. This is all on our website. Read David Horowitz's article about this. He's the great scholar of the American left.
I want to stop that there. Can I get the lights, please? So how was the video? While everybody's eyes are adjusting? Good. It was good? I'd like to expand a little bit on the runaway convention real quick. We talked about the 70s. It actually, it started in the 70s, possibly back in the 60s. If you look at President Kennedy, he had a speechwriter by the name of Theodore Sorensen. And he also had a close confidant by the name of Arthur Goldberg. Now, when Roe versus Wade was decided by the Supreme Court, the states were wanting to start coming together with an Article 5. A lot of talk about it. Some applications were presented and everything. And those two gentlemen knew that an amendment would override the Supreme Court decision. So that's when they started coming out with this runaway convention and putting a fear amongst a lot of it's that article he was talking about. It's in that article about that, about Goldman and Sorensen. So I just wanted to point that out, that it really started, in my opinion, with that Roe versus Wade, because a lot of states were wanting to get rid of it, have a constitutional amendment to get rid of that Supreme Court ruling. So I have a couple of moments here. Does anybody have any questions about the video or anything else?
How many states you got on board right now?
We have 15 states. I'd have to turn the lights out again to show you where we're at. Wyoming is not on the list of either in the middle of talking about it. It is being sponsored right now by Bo Beitman, and we don't have any co-sponsors for it yet. We're waiting for it to get into the committee for here in Wyoming. And you know how a Wyoming legislature works. I mean, this year's legislation, next year's budget. It's just back and forth. It's just short time frame. So we're doing what we can. There's many other volunteers going around the state right now doing town halls, trying to talking to the same people sitting here today. Trying to get our legislators involved, get them talking, let's get this into committee and get a number on it, get a vote on it. He was just in Montana, I believe that was January 21st. South Dakota was even talking about it. And believe it or not, last year, Hawaii was even considering talking about it. So
how many states you got to get together?
Well, we need to have 34 states.
You think you can do that with the way the country is divided right now?
Yeah. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be here. I mean, I wouldn't be here. I volunteer.
Yeah. Right.
I have a full-time job outside of this, and I'm passionate about this. And I believe this is something that we really, really need to focus on. And the thing is that when I asked everybody who heard of Convention of States prior to the Facebook post that I had made, or Brian making a mention around town and stuff, just over half the people never heard about it. And that's the problem. Nobody's really heard about it. My aunt had this steakhouse, and I think you heard me say this before. My aunt had this steakhouse, and she always told us kids, she says, if you make one person mad because of the way their food was brought out to them, she goes, you just lost 100 customers. That one person's going to go and tell this person and that person. You know how the word of mouth goes. And this is, of course, back before social media and all that stuff. And you look at it now, it's even worse. But now let's reverse that. You know about Convention of States. Now, you're going to go to your job or you're going to go to a function and you're going to say, I went to this town hall and I heard some pretty good stuff. I hope you heard some pretty good stuff.
No, I agree with you 100%, but
good.
We got a lot of people against this.
We do have a lot of people against this.
This country is divided like the Civil War.
We are. But if you was to go back and you talk to those people and say, listen, watch this video, go to this town hall, go to this website, just read through the information that they have. If you go to the website on the packets that I had given you guys, you can find all of this information and a lot more. And if you go into resources, you can also sign a petition there, or if you talk to somebody about this.
I understand what you're talking about, but when you got a population of, say, California, I left that place, I'm like you, I left that place 20 years ago because
that's why I didn't stay when I got
But what I'm getting at is, how are you going to get that state?
You don't need to go ahead.
Well, I understand that, but what I'm getting at is you got all the divided states. You're not getting all the divided states, you got to get 3/4 of the states to come to this agreement.
Well, you do, and it's doable. New Hampshire, this last election, do you know how much New Hampshire flipped from blue to red? They flipped 57 House seats in New Hampshire. 57. They flipped 6 Senate seats in New Hampshire. They still have a Democratic governor. But here's the one thing that everybody needs to know is, let's say Wyoming votes on it this week. It passes the House and it passes the Senate. Do you think it goes to Governor Gordon for him to possibly veto? I want to answer that. No. There isn't a single governor that can veto this legislation. The governors cannot. They have no power. They have no power over it. That is a plus side. So we have 29. We have 29 Republican states, and that's up and down the board: House, Senate, and the governor. And then we have, I believe, 2 states that are split. And then we have, and the rest of them are, of course, Democrat. So, I mean, our numbers are good. There's 7,383 state legislatures across the United States. 7,383. And in the House side, Republicans lead it by 493, I think. I'm close. And then on the Senate side, we lead it by 289. I could be backwards on that. I'm not going to hurt on. But we lead it across the state. We really do. And this is a movement that I believe in. If I didn't think we'd get to that 34 mark, I wouldn't be here. I'd be sitting home drinking beer. But I might just go drink beer.
When you look at a map of the United States on voting districts, most of the United States, when you look at the colors, is Republican.
Oh, yeah.
But the population areas like San Francisco, LA, New York City, Chicago, Detroit, and of course Atlanta. You look at Georgia, it's nearly all Republican, except for the cities. So I think you're exactly right. I think we need to be optimistic because when you look at that map, you know, we don't have the population, but we've got a lot of representatives. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of Democrats that are happy right now.
What you're saying there is a prime example for Colorado.
Yeah.
Colorado is bluer than blue around Denver.
Yeah.
But you go outside of that, Grand Junction, I mean, that is blood red.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so you just got to look at, you can't look at the small picture. You have to really look at the large scope of it.
You look at it,
And to answer
your mind.
Right, and to answer your question, can we get to 34? Yes. And I had a gentleman last week, I'll get you just 1 second. I had a gentleman ask me last week at the Marlton Town Hall. He says, well, how long will this take you? And I said, I don't know. I can't answer that question. How long will this take? It could take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Right? And he said, well, 5 years we don't have a country left. I'm like, well, I can't think of it that way. I think that we're hanging on the best we can for what we're doing. So, and I also asked him, I said, well, what other options do we have? Does anybody here have another option of what we can do to curb everything back? I've heard people say, you know what, we can vote them out, we can get somebody else in there. But I have a thing about that. It's 2010. 2010, we had one of the largest flips in Congress from Democrat to Republican. We're talking, I think it was like 70 plus some seats. And I can count on my hand, this hand right here, how many stayed true to their word. The rest of them fell into the swamp. The rest of them fell into the swamp. So when somebody says, well, you know what, we're going to vote them out, we're going to put somebody else in there that does our bidding, does what we want them to do, it just doesn't happen.
The voters may get Liz
The voters. What's that? I'm sorry.
I said then we get Liz Cheney.
I'm going to try to avoid that for as long as I can.
Well, I can see your point. It don't get rid of them because another bureaucrat would go in there.
Right. Right. And is it Bouchard, I think, is the first guy that had said that he's going to run against her. And I don't know enough about him to make a judgment on that. You know, so I can't comment on that.
We know enough about Liz Cheney.
What's that?
We know enough about Liz Cheney.
We do. And I'm in a position where I cannot comment.
Okay.
You know.
I got 2 questions.
Yes.
The first one is...
Oh, wait, real quick. You had a question?
I did.
I'm sorry.
I got a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Number one, how long has the movement been going? Where did it start?
Okay, so the first 2 states to pass this was in 2014. Yes, it's been a little bit. 2019 was a dead year. Or 2020 was a dead year.
Dead year for everybody.
Yeah. Georgia and Florida were the first 2 states. The last 2 states was in 2019.
Georgia did get on board?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the last 2 states was, I believe it was March was Utah. Yep. And then April was Mississippi.
Okay. Second question, if it goes to committee here in Wyoming, which committee would most likely it go to? Any idea?
You know what? I honestly wish I had an answer for that. Because I honestly, I don't know. I really don't know. But I can find out.
Okay, I'd like to know that.
Yeah, and if you sign a petition, which
I have.
everybody here does, then I will get a hold of you and let you know. And I should know by tomorrow.
So what does the Brasso think about this?
Do you know what? All the ones
He's a
that
politician.
I know. I'm just curious.
There is. Well, you look at Ted Cruz. He's pushing for the
Is he a
term limits.
Yeah.
But it's a dead horse on his side because they're not going to vote themselves out of a job. They just won't do it. They love the power. They love the money that's coming in. Some politicians are banking on Tesla right now, just dumping money in before Tesla came out. This whole Green New Deal 2.0, 0.357 or whatever it is nowadays. But so politicians are making money on the side. I mean, and when they leave here, they're going to go and work for who they've been making money for. And then whoever they took over that position, they're going to go back into the.
But we still get to pay for all their retirement and all their
We do.
benefits.
So I'm glad you said that. I'll get you real quick. Sorry. Does anybody know what our deficit is right now? I honestly can't remember now. It's like $28 trillion. Yeah. Does anybody know what an unfunded liability is?
75 trillion.
Actually, you're close. Because last I heard it was like 140 trillion, but I actually just read another article yesterday, and we're at $200 trillion for unfunded liabilities. Pensions. Let's say you just bought a house, or you bought a house a few years back. You owe $250,000 on it. You have a $250,000 in unfunded liabilities. For pensions, what asset? I mean, just it's everything that the government can just combine. Pensions is one of them. Like with Social Security, Medicare, all of it unfunded, and they're barely funding it now.
How much debt does China own?
That percentage I can't give you, but it's a pretty big chunk. So you remember seeing that one graph up there about how much of our budget we pay into 65% into interest. So this is our government spending. Where does it go? Right? And this is the only copy I have. But you can see here for mandatory spending, 62%. The GDP goes to that. Well, we don't go by GDP. They always spend more than what they bring in. $376 billion. That's just for this year. Of course, it goes up every year. $376 billion goes to interest on debt. Interest on debt.
Well,
Wyoming doesn't even accumulate debt.
American people in total owe $14 trillion.
Right.
The U.S. government owes twice that much. 330 million people owe $14 trillion. And one government agency owes $28 trillion.
Yep.
That's all screwed up. The first time ever we've exceeded 100% of debt to GDP. It used to, a couple of years ago, it was 75%. Or a few years back, it was 75% of GDP, debt to GDP ratio. In the last few years, it's now almost 130%.
So in other words, this is how we stop them guys, is to get all these states on board, and the states have the power to tell Congress to shut on these amendments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The states have the power through Article 5. And
it's never been done before.
And it's never been done before. And let me get to his question, and then I want to answer that real quick, because I don't want you to forget your questions. But
I got two of them.
I'm ready.
My number one question is, the only place you can sign the petition is online?
No. I actually have hard copies here that you can sign.
Good.
I do have, I come prepared.
Then, my second question is, I agree with your three focused objectives. Is it possible to have another objective in there during the conventions? Because I've got a real problem with voter integrity. I mean, you've got 80 million people in this country that's saying, you know, I don't know what happened, but our president should be president.
That list, what you're asking, that list would be just endless.
Oh, okay.
It would be.
So this is a start.
Because this is a start.
Yeah.
Because just imagine, let's say we hit that 34 state threshold. Congress is going to hate us. They're going to hate us. But this is what's on the application. And this is something to remember is, let me go back real quick, and I want to explain when you said, have we gotten close or anything like that. We actually did. Congress wanted to pass the 17th Amendment on it. And it had to do with state senators, for congressmen for the election, whether or not they were elected or they were appointed by the state for senators. And the petitions were going around. I don't seem to have the thing on me. Oh, I'm sorry, it's right here.
Back in the 70s?
No, 1903 was the very first one. So it was for election of senators. And the amount of states that were doing it. And Congress just got scared because they knew the states were about ready to have some power. So they wound up, in the middle of that, and then voting it on themselves to keep the states from actually.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is how do we keep them guys in Congress right now from making an amendment saying this ain't gonna work?
They can't do that.
They can't undo that?
No, they can't do that.
Well, I understand that, but there's a lot of stuff in the Constitution that's been amended.
So right here is a list, a couple hundred applications, state applications for an Article 5 in this list. And I actually just printed this off yesterday. So what's funny too is that right around that time period for electing senators, going from state appointed to election, there were also, a lot of the states were trying to pass a Article 5 movement for income tax cap. So that way, because that was when the income tax was coming out, and the states, there was people that were paying 90%. You know, the top 1%ers were paying 90% income tax. And so they're trying to do an Article 5 on limiting on that. So that answer, there's over 400 different applications that were done, starting from 1789, and the last one was, just giving just a brief second here, the last one was just a couple years ago. But, so going back to the application, it was in 2019 by Mississippi. So the one thing about the application that everybody needs to know is they have to be identical. The wording has to be identical. So when you saw the application on the video, every state that has passed it, passed that application. So you have this term limit, the Article 5 term limit website stuff. They're trying to get the term limits and stuff like that. But they just don't have the ground. They don't have the wording correctly. Because when you get to that 34 state, do you think Congress is going to send us over to the applications over to make sure that all the wording is correct? They're going to make sure that everything is identical, because if it isn't, then they can reject those applications.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
They're going to do whatever they can, but they cannot stop in Article 5 if every application is identical, and every application is. Okay. Did you have another question?
Nope, that was my 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. There are a lot of things that really are clear in the Constitution right now that the current power group is refusing to honor. Even if this goes through, how can we force them to respect it?
It's a good question. That's a hard question to answer, but I'll answer it. So this is the pocket Constitution, right? This one's a little bit thicker than normal. That's because of the Declaration of Independence is printed on this. You see the book that the guy had there, the 3,000 plus pages and so forth. So anytime that a law is passed and it's taken up by the Supreme Court, and whatever that Supreme Court ruling is gets printed into that book. So when they're doing laws, they're always reverting back to this rule or that rule, or this Supreme Court verdict or that Supreme Court verdict. And everything gets printed, so they just always revert back to that. I think one of our biggest issues when it comes to laws is the Commerce Clause, the Interstate Commerce Clause. That's where the government has us in any way, shape, or form when it comes down to fuel tax. You got, you know, I know you have a lot of every one of your equipment has IFTA stickers. You have to deal with the federal government there. I mean, so the government's got your hands in everything, mainly because of that Commerce Clause. But when it comes down to this, what do you think that the government's going to do to try to change the rules on, place term limits on Congress? How are they going to change the rules on that? How are they going to change the rules on impose fiscal restraints? Now, this is not the final wording. This is the subject matter that would go to the convention. It would be up to the convention delegates, which is appointed by the state. It would be up to them to talk about the language, what will be in it.
We're not going to do any of those.
Freedom of speech, free exercise of religion, the freedom to defend ourselves, those are just as clear as they can be, and yet now they're being fairly disregarded. I think you're saying, I hear what they're saying, that these are really so clear that they really can't mess around with it. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would think, yeah, because since this hasn't been done, if it goes to a convention, delegates will sit down there. The state can send as many delegates as they want. They can send 1, they can send 20. It's just one state, one vote. But everybody sits down there. They're going to talk about the rules. They'll get the rules lined out first thing. All right, and then they're going to sit down. They're going to talk about what needs to happen for the language, and then they're going to have committees. They're going to have subcommittees, and they're just going to bring everything together. So the language, we don't know, but this is the subject matter. And then they can put into whatever the words they want. What's funny is I was on the Library of Congress's website here a few days ago, and I was reading the transcripts. They actually had transcripts through the Constitutional Convention. And starting from May 15th, they started. And they were talking, and it had Patrick Henry, and it had, it just had a whole bunch of people that were talking, and it was all transcribed on the wording. So the wording is very important when it comes down to laws. And most of the discussion, they knew what the laws were going to be, they just didn't know what the wording was going to be. They're going to do the same thing here, the wording just like that.
You know, I think this last go-around with President Trump really awoken a lot of people to see all the corruption that is in our government and how they're manipulating the Constitution to make it fit what they want to do. And I think not only Republicans, but a fair amount of Democrats are upset with that as well. Even though they didn't like Trump's rhetoric or his speech or him being rich, you know, whatever they held against him. But, you know, everybody wants to do something, and nobody knows what to do, right? I mean, you want to fight, you want to make your voice heard, if people are like me, I just want to jump up and down and scream that this happened right in front of my eyes and I can't do anything about it. But this is a start that we can, because our state legislators are not going to take it upon themselves, even though they have the power to join this right now or to do this. They're not going to do it unless we push them. And, you know, more people need to get on board with it and tell your kids and your grandkids and, like you said, everybody who will listen to you, no matter what side of the creek they're on, because this is what we can do. I mean, this is one thing we can do.
It is, right. And you know, and I tell this to a lot of people, and I'll say it again here. What other options do we have? We have no voice. We have no voice, and I'm speaking from the Republican side, and I'm speaking from the Democrat side, I'm speaking from the independents. Nobody has a voice anymore. Right. The federal government is our voice. We might not like the wording that comes out. We can't change what they say.
Well, they gave us a voice 233 years ago.
They
That's
did.
what I was gonna say.
They did.
That's what we gotta use.
So you look at a brick wall, all right? That's our Constitution, all right? And it's been standing for over 200 years, and then slowly you start chipping away at that mortar, and every now and then you might pull a brick out, and then you start chipping away at that mortar, and then you pull another brick out, and you keep doing this. And let's say that wall is over 200 years old. How many bricks are gone? How much of that mortar is gone? That wall's not going to stand much longer once you start picking and pulling away. So, and I ask everybody, what other options do we have right now? I can't think of anything else. I know you can vote somebody else in. I mean, we can vote Liz Cheney out here in a couple of years, and get somebody else in there. Is that going to really help us out?
No, but it'll make me feel better.
Okay, so it would make me feel better too.
Well, when it comes to spending, the Republicans are just as bad as the Democrats.
And I am not taking that away either. I am not taking that away. Because they are. I can't think of maybe 10 congressmen that I actually like, you know? It is. It's
And
really
when you
bad.
look at the the powers of the federal government in the Constitution, there's only about 6 or 8 powers that they have. And it says, all other powers belongs to the state and the people. The government can raise a military, they can defend the borders, they can put tariffs on foreign countries, I think what else? Interstate commerce, there's 8 of them if I remember right. I can't remember the other 2. But anyway, all other powers, it says right there, plain, all other powers belongs to the state and to the people.
So
And I don't know how we ever got to where we are, but that's exactly what it says.
So if you look at the Virginia plan, this was prior to the convention back in 1787. If you look at the Virginia plan, that plan, because Congress at that time had no power. They were just a bunch of guys sitting around, just a good old boys club. They really had no powers. There was really no federal government because each state was its own sovereignty. It's basically, in essence, that's what it was. And when they went in to talk about, hey, you know what, we need to add some rules here, let's add some laws here, and try to get the federal government to have a little bit more power to help with international affairs and so forth. That Virginia plan was basically a plan to eliminate states' rights and just go under one border. That's what it was. Now, of course, we didn't follow that because the New Jersey plan came out right after that, and we had quite a few items in our Constitution that came out of that New Jersey plan. So we're just ants on just feeding the queens, a lot of them, you know. So if you look at the big scope of things, this is just one item that we can do. And just imagine if we got this, we got the 34 states. We go to a convention. They come up with the verbiage. They sit down, they said, all right, this is what we've got. They send it back to the states. Even the people, you, I, you, we all agree on it. It's like, yes, finally. And I'm just throwing this number out there. You've got 4 terms on House and 2 terms on Senate. That's it. After that, you're done. You know, and then it votes 38 states pass it. All right, there's our 3 amendments right there. Now we start another one, income tax. You know, I'm just going.
Three
You don't address voter ID, you're
No, I
got 2 more questions for you. Do you accept donations? Because
we do. It's not
this costs you money to run all over the country.
No, I will not.
Okay, well, money's for us.
So who's paying for
It does. No, I'm sorry, but no.
The second question is, where
Who's
can I
paying
sign
for the brochures?
petition?
Who's paying for the brochures and the paperwork and posters and all the stuff
You want me to give you that? You want me to lie to you or give you the honest answer?
You can
I paid for all this.
You paid for
I'm
all
out of
this?
here. My back is killing me. No. I get. But
That's what I was wondering, you know.
yes, it is. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
So, if we sign the petition, where does the petition go?
Okay, good question. So when you sign the petition, if you do the paper or if you do it online, if you do it on paper, then I put them into the computer, and then myself or another district captain will eventually give you a call within a day or two, maybe 3, and thanking you. And if you had any more questions, we would answer them then. One copy goes into a data bank. Of course, one copy goes to the district captain for that area. But mainly, the copy goes to your legislatures, both your legislatures in your House and your Senate side. Now, one thing to remember is I've got 4 kind of rules, I guess, and they're all tied for one. One is, people ask me, well, what can I do, to help get this going? One is sign a petition. That is the number one thing. And the other one that I have is get the word out, talking to people. Let's get more people involved, more people with some knowledge into it. Let's get the word out. Let's get more petitions signed. 2, volunteer. If you can volunteer, whether it's like a social media warrior or a phone bank operator or whatever, volunteer. So that's 3 number ones. And then the 4th one, and it's probably the most important, is call your legislature. Email your legislature. Talk to them. Tell them how much you feel that this is what we need. And I know you feel that this is what we need. I mean, there's nothing else. There's nothing else that we can do.
How do we get the legislature to back us up on that?
Pressure on it.
How many warranty center calls have you ever get? Warranty center calls. Q&A! Minimum. Does that answer your question?
So do you need to be a registered voter to sign the petition? I'm assuming so, but...
No.
No? Do you need to be a citizen?
No.
So they won't cross-reference the signatures anyway?
They do. All they do is that what they're looking for is duplicates. That's what they're looking for.
Hey, I don't want dead people voting this year. I don't know why they do.
Yeah.
Is this, let me see if I understand something. So, as individuals is difficult, but what we're doing is getting the states involved.
That's it.
And so the states have got some more power than the individuals. So we as individuals get the states involved. And that's where the pressure comes from the state legislature.
Yeah, so when it comes down to it, what we're trying to do is, of course, kick the state in the rear end to get it going. But it's the individuals to call the legislature saying, hey, I'm interested in this. I want this going through. Hey, go to a town hall, read this literature, let's get you involved in this. Because Senator Fred Baldwin is in this area, right? So if you have 1,000 people in his district sign a petition, he's going to get 1,000 emails with everybody's name on it, stating that this is what you support. And then if he starts getting that, what did we talk about earlier, the warranty call center, if he starts getting those kind of calls saying, hey, Commission of States, minus the warranty. But if he starts getting those calls, then he's going to say, you know what, I've got a lot of constituents that are really wanting this, and if this happens to come up, and if I'm sitting in that committee, and I vote it down, what's going to happen come the next election cycle?
Another observation, when you think of California deserves everything you get. And you got Gavin Newsom, but they're going to get him recalled. And that's Republicans do it. We've got to do it.
My opinion on a censure, because we're censuring Liz Cheney. And in my opinion, a censure is not, it doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. I mean, they can take her off of a committee. That's the extent of it.
Republicans won't fight.
Yes, I am. Actually, live 4 miles away from it.
Do you have the addresses and or emails from the state legislatures?
I do. On some of these pamphlets, I did have strips on there. But if we sign a petition, and I'll send you myself or somebody else will send you an email back. You'll get a phone call, and you'll get an email back. And on that email, it'll have both of your legislatures on that email as well.
To that point, if you just get on Wyoming.gov, also all the states' elected officials are on there, phone numbers and email addresses also.
Some of these pamphlets, I'll have to dig it out, but I do have.
But you can
for
Google
this
their
district.
name. You can Google their name now.
It brings them up too.
I'm sorry?
You can Google their name and
Yeah, you'll have their office number in Cheyenne, you'll have their office number here, and you'll have their email address, all three. Yes, sir.
And so it took 6 years to get 15 states.
Yes, it did.
And on these 3 topics.
Okay,
It took a couple of months to get 17 states to want to sue over election integrity. If this was modified to add another topic like election integrity, would it start to move faster? Or would you have to spend another 6 years just for those 15 states?
So if you was to modify the application, you would have to completely start all the way over again, because there would be no.
We only have a third of what you need right now.
Right, well, but so on top of 15 states that have signed a board, there is another 7 states that have passed in at least one house. So there's 7 more right there. And then on top of that 7, we have active legislation in another 8 states. And the funny thing is that Idaho and Wyoming doesn't fit in anywhere in that category.
I guess I was just thinking.
And I can't figure it out. Why hasn't Wyoming talked about it? Why hasn't Idaho talked about it? I'm sorry, what were you saying, sir?
Oh, I was just wondering if, the enthusiasm behind another topic would help move it along faster.
It might. But the application is set, so this is what we have to work with. Yeah. But I agree, yeah, election integrity. I get an income tax cap, I can think of 100 different things that could possibly happen.
It's on weekend.
It is.
Because I didn't understand what the next
Does anybody else have any questions?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Our local town governments, will they have this literature available and a sign-up sheet for those people we may want to send to town hall to sign up? Will that
Yeah,
be
I have
available?
some more right back here that I can give you.
We could leave them here at town hall, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely, I can leave all these here.
And that's not against any kind of ruling.
No.
That this government, this local government.
We still got freedom of assembly. Believe it or not. We still have freedom of assembly.
No, and on these packets, there will be the conventionofstates.com, the web link. You could just go into that and you can sign a petition there, or if you folks would like to sign it today on the paper. And then I can get all those put in, and then when I go to put those in, we get a phone call and an email. Thank you for support. And another thing too is that volunteering. Is there any more questions?
Yeah. Is it a simple majority of the state legislators? Is it just about 50%?
Yes. Yes, it is.
How would we know if, say, there's 10,000 people in Lincoln County, if 6,000 of us vote for this, like our state legislature did their job?
Are you talking about if 6,000, if there's 10,000 in this county and 6,000 sign a petition?
That they're held to a standard to take our voice to the state.
Well, these guys.
That's where calling your state legislature, finding out where he's at.
And don't just call once.
No.
Make it a week. Hey, I kid you not. I call Barrasso and Loomis and Cheney once a week. I call their offices once a week. You ever get them? I talk to aides. All you ever get is an answer machine telling you that she's going to call you back, and she ain't never going to do that. She don't want to back. So you're not on the first way to take time to pick up your phone and call.
That's the biggest thing. Email.
I'll tell you what, writing a certified letter is the way to do it. They have to know. They have to recognize that letter. They can't sit there and just click off the phone. If everybody in this room picked up the phone
twice a week in Coleman that
Well, I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, one
So
more
in order to
time.
pass Articles 5, you need two things to happen, right? You need 2/3 of Congress, both houses to pass, or you need 2/3 of states, which is in 34 states.
Congress has zero, other than to hold a time and place for it. We're talking about on the state side.
So we're trying to get 34 states,
You need
correct?
34
So is that
states.
still a popular vote?
Yes, so it's
In each county, or is that in each state?
That's for state legislature.
Okay,
It has
but
to
you're
pass both between the House and the Senate to go to convention.
correct, but I mean, we're still talking to a town of 400 people that their voice hadn't been heard in years.
This is a fantastic.
I'm just saying, I mean,
I'm being honest.
if we're talking counties and and we're trying to get Republican states in order to, because that's what we're reaching out to, right? 34 Republican states, but Democrat states aren't going to vote for this. So.
That's not necessarily true.
We're going to see, right? I mean, we're on the see. Georgia's already on board. Yeah, Georgia's already on board. Well, yeah, well, we're going to see, but that's what we're trying to do, right? Is reach out to Republican states in order to get that. So is that county-wide or is that statewide?
That's statewide. That's through the state House and Senate for the majority. Once that goes through, then the governor has no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He has no say. So the governor can't veto it. And it stays within the House and the Senate. Once that state passes, then you can just chalk that one up as number 16, 17, 18, 19 on the way down.
Okay.
All right. And then once you hit that 34 mark, then it would go to the convention. Then by that time, because Congress actually gets a copy of all the applications as well. So the House, the Senate, and the Vice President, I believe, are the three that get a copy of the application. So once all 34 applications are met, then Congress, by law, has to name a time and place. And if they take their time, there's an actual literature that I have that talks about if they refuse to do that, they would go to the courts. The courts will finally say, here's the time, here's the place. And then, so once that happens, then let's say it does go to convention. Is it going to happen in a month? No, I would hope not. Is it going to happen in 6 or 7 months? I kind of hope not as well. I want them to take their time and do it right. So if it took a year, it takes a year. Once they come out with the verbiage for these 3 articles, if these 3 make it through the convention, then it goes back to all 50 states vote. So you need 38 states to pass it. Not a bad amendment won't get through, because all it takes is 1 House or 1 Senate, 13 states to knock it down. It's a high bar. Like they were saying in the video, it is a high bar, but it's doable. It's doable. And you got to think about it this way on the term limit side, because each one's going to be a different vote. It's not going to be all 3 on the same vote. They're going to be a vote on this, a vote on this, and a vote on this. Correct? Right. So let's say these 2 don't get through, and this one does, or all 3, or you can mix it up however you want. If somebody in Joe Schmuckatelli land votes no on term limits, they're going to be held accountable for that, and their constituents will be like, yeah, really? So they gotta, it's their butts are on the line too. So you gotta think about it that way as well.
You probably explained that earlier, but I was pump drinking. So.
No, I don't. If nobody has any questions, I will stick around for a little bit longer and talk to you guys if you'd like.
Well, and the way I see it is, we can either do something now, it's signing a petition.
I agree.
Do something now, or regret it in a year.
I agree.